walked into the interview room with his little girl by his side, and the silence was deafening. Everyone expected failure, but what the CEO did next changed everything. Before we dive into this heart-touching story, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales that inspire. The morning sun peeked through the curtains of a small apartment, its light spilling onto the faded walls and the scattered toys on the floor. A man sat at the edge of his bed, staring down at his worn-out shoes. His name was Daniel, a single father whose life had been reduced to a series of battles with bills, with time, with loneliness, and most of all, with the fear of failing his little girl. Beside him, curled up under a blanket, was Lily, his 5-year-old daughter. Her soft breathing was the only sound in the room, a fragile reminder of why he kept pushing forward despite everything. He glanced at her, and the tension in his shoulders eased just a little. She was his strength, his reason, his everything. Today was supposed to be important, perhaps the most important day of his life. A job interview at one of the biggest firms in the city. A chance, maybe, to finally step out of the endless cycle of low-paying, temporary work that barely kept them afloat. Daniel had prayed for this opportunity, prepared for it, and yet, as he looked at his sleeping daughter, a knot of fear twisted in his chest. He had called 3 neighbors, left 2 messages with friends, even begged the elderly lady down the hall to watch Lily for a few hours. But no one was free. Everyone had their own lives, their own troubles. And so he was left with a choice: miss the interview and lose the opportunity, or take Lily with him and risk looking unprofessional. He rubbed his face with his hands. The voices of doubt echoed in his head. They'll laugh at you. They'll think you're irresponsible. Who brings a child to a job interview? But then another voice, stronger and filled with love, reminded him, you promised her a better life. You can't give up now. Daniel rose, put on his suit, the same one he had worn to countless interviews before. It was slightly frayed at the cuffs, the color faded from years of wear, but he straightened the tie with determination. He gently woke Lily, who blinked up at him with sleepy eyes. Daddy, where are we going? She whispered, her voice still heavy with dreams. To a place where Daddy might get a new job, he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. And you're coming with me, sweetheart. Is that okay? Her little arms wrapped around his neck as he lifted her. Okay, Daddy, I'll be quiet, I promise. The words pierced his heart. Even at such a young age, she understood too much. He kissed her cheek, whispering, you don't have to be quiet. You just have to be you. The bus ride to the city was long, filled with the noise of strangers, the rattling of wheels, and the weight of stairs. People glanced at the man in the old suit with a child on his lap. Some looked away quickly, others held their gaze longer, curious, maybe even judgmental. Daniel kept his head down, holding Lily close as if shielding her from the world. When they reached the towering building of glass and steel, Daniel paused at the entrance. The structure loomed above him, intimidating and powerful. He looked at his reflection in the shiny glass doors, a tired man with dark circles under his eyes, holding a little girl dressed in a faded pink dress. For a moment, he almost turned back. But Lily's hand squeezed his, and that small gesture gave him the courage he needed. They walked into the lobby. The marble floors gleamed, and the receptionist at the desk raised her eyebrows when she saw them. Daniel cleared his throat nervously, stating his name and appointment. The woman's eyes flicked to Lily, but she said nothing, only pointed him toward the elevator. Inside the elevator, Daniel's heart pounded louder with every floor they ascended. He kissed the top of Lily's head, whispering, just a little longer, sweetheart. She nodded, her big eyes wide with curiosity as the numbers above the doors lit up one by one. When they finally stepped into the interview room, a hush fell over the space. 4 panelists sat at a long table, folders and pens neatly arranged before them. Their eyes shifted instantly to the small child holding her father's hand. One of them raised an eyebrow, another exchanged a look with his colleague. Daniel cleared his throat again, introducing himself, but he could feel the weight of their stares. He gently pulled out a chair and sat down, placing Lily on his lap. She clutched her toy rabbit, her legs swinging nervously. The panelists shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered something under her breath, and another tapped his pen impatiently. Daniel's palms grew sweaty, his voice shaky as he tried to answer the first question. But before the second question could be asked, the door opened, and the CEO walked in. The room immediately straightened, a sense of authority filling the air. The man was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his presence commanding without effort. His eyes swept the room, and landed on Daniel and Lily. The silence was unbearable. Daniel braced himself, expecting the worst, a dismissive comment, a shake of the head, perhaps even being asked to leave. He held Lily closer, preparing for the humiliation. But then something unexpected happened. The CEO smiled. A genuine, warm smile that softened the hard lines of his face. He walked toward the table, glanced at the empty chair beside Daniel, and without a word, pulled it up. Then he crouched slightly, looking at Lily. "Is this seat taken, young lady?" he asked gently. Lily's eyes widened, and she shook her head shyly. The CEO placed the chair beside her father and said, "Well, now it is. You're welcome here too." The panelists looked stunned, their expressions frozen. Daniel blinked, hardly believing what he had just witnessed. His throat tightened, emotions swelling inside him. He managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir." The CEO simply nodded, then took his own seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin," he said, his voice calm but firm. And just like that, the atmosphere of the room shifted. The judgment melted away, replaced by an air of curiosity and respect. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost: dignity. The questions began, but something felt different now. The sharp, almost judgmental tone from the panelists softened after the CEO's gesture. Daniel answered carefully, his voice steadying with each word. He spoke about his experience, about working 2 jobs at once, about learning to manage teams even in low-level positions, about solving problems under pressure. But he also spoke about his daughter, without even meaning to. When they asked how he handled stress, he mentioned how reading bedtime stories to Lily reminded him of what truly mattered. When they asked about teamwork, he explained how raising a child alone taught him more about patience, compromise, and problem-solving than any office could. At first, he worried he was saying too much, but the CEO leaned forward, listening closely, a faint smile never leaving his face. Lily, meanwhile, sat quietly in her chair, her little legs dangling above the floor. At one point she reached into her tiny backpack and pulled out a crayon and a scrap of paper. She began drawing, her tongue poking out in concentration. The CEO glanced at her and chuckled softly. "She's already more focused than half the people I've seen in this room," he said, earning a ripple of laughter that broke the tension. Daniel felt his chest loosen. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving an interview. He was being seen, not just as a candidate, but as a man, as a father, as a human being. One of the panelists, a woman with sharp glasses and a clipboard, finally voiced what everyone had been thinking. "Mr. Carter, bringing a child to a professional interview is unconventional, to say the least. Don't you think it sends the wrong impression about your priorities?" The room went still again. Daniel swallowed hard. This was the question he had dreaded from the moment he decided to bring Lily. He looked at his daughter, then back at the panelist. His voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. "My priority," he said, "is to provide for her. To show her that I won't give up, no matter how difficult things get. Yes, I know it's unusual. I know some people might even call it irresponsible. But I couldn't leave her home alone, and I couldn't miss this chance. So I chose to show up, with her. Because that's life. You don't always get perfect circumstances. Sometimes you show up carrying everything you've got, even if the world tells you not to." The room was silent. Even the panelist with the sharp glasses hesitated, her pen frozen above the page. The CEO leaned back, studying Daniel with thoughtful eyes. "Well said," he murmured. "Life rarely waits until we're ready. It tests us when we're at our weakest. What matters is how we respond." He shifted slightly, addressing the panel. "Let's not forget, resilience is one of the strongest qualities we look for in our leaders." Daniel felt something stir inside him, hope. The questions continued, but now the conversation took on a different tone. Instead of grilling him with cold facts and figures, they asked about his problem-solving skills, his vision for the future, his ability to motivate others. Daniel spoke honestly, drawing on the struggles he had faced as a father, the lessons hardship had taught him. Lily occasionally looked up from her drawing and whispered to her dad, "You're doing great, Daddy." The words melted his heart, and a quiet smile spread across the CEO's face each time he heard her. After nearly an hour, the formal part of the interview ended. The panelists excused themselves, leaving Daniel alone with the CEO. Daniel's nerves spiked again. This, he knew, was the real test. The CEO leaned forward, folding his hands. "You know," he began, "I was raised by a single mother. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She'd come Home late, exhausted, but she never once let me feel like I was less than anyone else. People underestimated her all the time, but her resilience shaped me into who I am today. Daniel's eyes widened. He hadn't expected such a personal confession. The CEO continued, "When I saw you walk in with your daughter, I didn't see irresponsibility. I saw a man doing whatever it takes. And that's the kind of determination I respect." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to respond, but the words caught in his chest. The CEO smiled gently at Lily, who held up her drawing shyly. "Look, Daddy, I drew us," she said. The crayon sketch showed 3 stick figures, herself, her father, and a tall man she had drawn with a crown on his head. "Who's this?" the CEO asked, pointing at the crowned figure. "That's you," Lily giggled. "Because Daddy says you're the boss." The CEO laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the room. He took the drawing and said, "Well, I don't know about the crown, but I'm honored." He placed the drawing carefully on the desk, then turned back to Daniel. His expression grew serious again, though his eyes remained warm. "You're hired, not because I feel sorry for you, but because you've proven you can handle more than most people ever will. If you can juggle life and fatherhood the way you do, I know you can handle challenges here." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Sir, thank you. You don't know what this means to us." His voice cracked, tears blurring his vision. "I think I do," the CEO replied softly. He extended his hand. Daniel shook it firmly, his grip trembling with gratitude. At that moment, Lily climbed off her chair and hugged her father's leg. "Daddy, does this mean we can buy ice cream now?" she asked innocently. Daniel laughed through his tears. "Yes, sweetheart, it means we can finally have ice cream." The CEO's eyes softened as he watched them. "Take the rest of the day to celebrate with her. We'll see you on Monday." As Daniel left the building, holding Lily's hand tightly, the city seemed brighter, the air lighter. For the first time in a long time, the weight on his shoulders lifted. He looked down at his daughter, who skipped happily beside him, and whispered, "We did it, Lily. We really did it." And somewhere high above, in an office filled with glass and steel, a CEO sat with a crayon drawing on his desk, a reminder that sometimes the best leaders are not the ones with perfect resumes, but the ones who carry the weight of love and responsibility, and still find the strength to show up. Long before that interview, Daniel's life had been a road paved with trials. He hadn't always imagined himself raising a child alone. There was a time, years ago, when he dreamed of a simple life, a steady job, a happy family, laughter in a warm home. For a while, he thought he had it. He had fallen in love young, married quickly, and when Lily was born, he swore he would be the kind of father who never let his child down. But life had other plans. His marriage cracked under the weight of financial strain, arguments, and broken promises. His wife, overwhelmed and restless, eventually left, chasing her own freedom. Daniel had begged her to stay, pleaded for Lily's sake, but in the end, she walked away without looking back. Daniel was left holding their daughter, just a baby at the time, his heart torn but his resolve unshaken. He worked night shifts at a warehouse, took side jobs fixing cars, and even delivered food on weekends. Every dollar went toward rent, formula, and the little things Lily needed. He sacrificed sleep, comfort, and even his health, but he never let her go without. There were nights when he sat in the dark, watching her sleep in her crib, wondering how he would pay for diapers the next day. There were mornings when he skipped meals so she could have enough to eat. Yet no matter how hard it became, one smile from her, one tiny hand gripping his finger, made it all worth it. When Lily grew old enough to talk, she would toddle into the kitchen as he brewed the cheapest coffee he could afford and say, "Daddy, you're my hero." The words struck him like lightning every time. "Me, a hero," he thought. He felt anything but, yet hearing it gave him the strength to keep going. Still, the constant string of temporary jobs wore him down. Employers saw him as expendable, a man who could be replaced easily. Interviews came and went, each rejection chipping away at his confidence. Some never called back, others told him bluntly that his resume lacked stability. One even asked if being a single parent would interfere with his commitment. He had left that interview with clenched fists, holding back tears of frustration. Through it all, Lily remained his light. She would sit on his lap as he filled out job applications, doodling on scraps of paper with crayons. Sometimes she would hand him a drawing of the two of them smiling and say, "Don't worry, Daddy. We'll be okay." The morning of the big interview, Daniel had tried to hide his nerves from her. He put on the old suit he had carefully kept ironed and folded in the closet, even though the fabric was thinning. He polished his shoes until they shone as best as they could. He told Lily it was an important day, and she helped by handing him his tie, giggling as she tried to put it around his neck. "I want to help, Daddy," she said proudly. "You already do, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her forehead. When no one could watch her, his heart sank. For a moment, he almost gave up, thinking, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I'm not meant to get this job. But then Lily had tugged on his sleeve and said, "Daddy, I'll be good. I'll be quiet, please don't give up." How could he? Her words gave him no choice but to try. And so he walked into that glass tower with her hand in his, determined to face whatever came. Now, hours later, as he walked out with the CEO's words echoing in his mind, "You're hired," Daniel realized every hardship had led to this moment. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every judgmental glance, it had all prepared him to stand tall in that room and speak his truth. But the story didn't end there. Monday came quickly, and Daniel found himself standing in front of the same building again, this time with a crisp shirt, a borrowed briefcase from a neighbor, and a new sense of purpose. Lily waved as he dropped her off at a small daycare arranged with part of his first paycheck's advance. She hugged him tightly before letting go. "You're gonna do amazing, Daddy," she said. Inside the office, Daniel felt nervous eyes on him again, but this time the stares were different. There was curiosity, yes, but also respect. Word had spread quickly about the single father who had brought his daughter to the interview, and about the CEO's surprising reaction. Some whispered that it had been unprofessional. Others said it was inspiring. The CEO called him into his office that afternoon. The crayon drawing still sat framed on the desk. Daniel's eyes widened at the sight. "You kept it," he said quietly. "Of course," the CEO replied. "It's a reminder of why we do what we do. This company isn't just about profit. It's about people, and I don't ever want to forget that." Daniel swallowed hard, emotion rising again. "Sir, I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance." The CEO waved a hand. "You don't owe me thanks. You earned it. Now prove me right." And Daniel did. In the weeks that followed, he poured himself into his work. His colleagues quickly saw his dedication, his ability to handle stress without losing his calm, his empathy for others. Whenever problems arose, he faced them head-on, often with the same quiet determination he used at home. At night, he would come home exhausted, but Lily would run into his arms, shouting, "Daddy, you're home." She would show him her drawings from daycare, and he would tell her about his day, always ending with, "We're one step closer, sweetheart." Little by little, life began to change. The bills were paid on time. The fridge stayed full. He even started saving a small amount each month, something he hadn't been able to do in years. Most importantly, Lily saw her father not just as her hero, but as living proof that resilience and love could overcome anything. One evening, weeks after his first day, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with Lily asleep in the next room. He looked at the paycheck in his hand and felt tears sting his eyes. It wasn't wealth, not yet. But it was stability, it was hope, and for a man who had once wondered if tomorrow would be brighter, that hope was everything. Daniel's first month at the company was both a challenge and a blessing. The workload was heavy, and the expectations were high. He often stayed late, poring over reports and strategies, determined not to let anyone down. At times, the fatigue felt unbearable. Balancing long hours at work and caring for Lily at home was no easy task, but every time he saw her sleeping peacefully, every time he heard her laughter, it gave him renewed strength. His colleagues began to notice something different about him. While others complained about stress, Daniel quietly pushed through. While some avoided responsibility, Daniel stepped up. He didn't just work hard, he worked with a sense of purpose that others couldn't quite explain. To him, every project, every deadline, wasn't just about climbing a career ladder. It was about securing a future for the little girl who waited for him at home. One afternoon, a senior manager grew frustrated during a meeting, struggling to find a solution to a difficult client problem. Tension filled the room. Daniel, though nervous, raised his hand and calmly suggested an alternative approach, something he had pieced together from observing patterns late at night while studying company reports at his kitchen table. At first, there was silence. Then the manager leaned back, eyebrows raised. "That might actually work," he admitted. The room shifted. People began to nod, adding on to Daniel's idea. By the end of the meeting, what had started as a desperate situation now had a clear plan forward, and it was because Daniel had spoken up. For the first time, he felt truly seen. Later that day, the CEO stopped by his desk. "Walk with me," he said. They moved through the quiet hallway, the hum of office chatter fading behind them. The CEO finally spoke. "You know why I kept your daughter's drawing on my desk?" Daniel shook his head. "Because it reminds me of my own mother," the CEO said softly. "She raised me alone, worked 3 jobs. She never complained, but I remember the exhaustion in her eyes. Still, she never gave up. And because of her sacrifices, I stand where I am today. When you walked into my office with Lily, I saw her all over again." Daniel's throat tightened. I didn't know. Most people don't," the CEO continued. "But that's why I gave you this chance. You're not just working for yourself. You're building a legacy for her. And I respect that more than any resume or degree." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest heavy with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," the CEO said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. That night, Daniel came home later than usual. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a new crayon drawing. He carefully picked it up. It showed 2 stick figures, one taller, one smaller, standing under a big, shining sun. Above them, in shaky letters, she had written, "Me and Daddy, forever." Daniel sat beside her, tears streaming down his face. He realized then that his journey wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building a life where Lily could dream without fear, where she could grow without hardship weighing her down. Months passed, and Daniel's position in the company grew stronger. He was promoted, entrusted with bigger projects, and even asked to mentor new hires. His colleagues admired his humility, his determination, and his quiet strength. Many of them found themselves inspired, not just by his work, but by the story they all knew, the story of a father who walked into an interview with his daughter and walked out with not just a job, but a second chance at life. Lily, too, continued to touch lives in her own small way. Sometimes, Daniel would bring her by the office briefly after daycare. She would wave shyly at his coworkers, hand out little drawings she had made, and brighten the entire floor with her laughter. People began to look forward to those rare visits, calling her the office sunshine. One evening, as Daniel tucked her into bed, she looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, are you happy now?" He paused, taken aback by the question. For so long, he had been focused on keeping her happy, on shielding her from the weight of their struggles. But now, for the first time in years, he truly was. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing her hair back gently. "I'm happy, because I have you." Her little arms wrapped around his neck. "I told you it would be okay." And she was right. Years later, Daniel would look back on that single moment in the interview room as the turning point of his entire life. The day he chose courage over fear. The day he spoke his truth, not knowing it would open the door to everything he had ever wanted. And through it all, he carried one unshakable belief: that love, resilience, and the innocence of a child could move mountains, break barriers, and change lives forever. Because sometimes, the most powerful story begins with nothing more than a tired father, a hopeful daughter, and a crayon drawing that said it all. Life isn't always fair, but love and determination can rewrite any story. This father and daughter proved that even in the darkest times, hope shines brightest. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and join us for more heart-touching journeys.